With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to the Idea Climbing Radio Show. Today we're talking about the 3 R's of relationship marketing, including referrals. And my guest is Bill Cates, CSP, CPAE, who works with professionals to speed up their growth without increasing their marketing budget. Bill's clients tap into his proven process to multiply their best clients through introductions from advocates and centers of influence, communicate their value proposition more effectively, blend digital and human strategies, and create a reputation in a profitable target market. He helps them move from push prospecting to magnetic marketing to attract more right fit clients. Bill is the author of 3 best-selling books, Get More Referrals Now, Beyond Referrals, and Radical Relevance. Bill's newest book, The Language of Referrals, was released in March of 2024. He's the founder of the Cates Academy for Relationship Marketing and is the host of the acclaimed Top Advisor podcast, topadvisorpodcast.com, now ranked in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. With all that going on, Bill, thank you for making the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you being inviting me. And just in case they miss what you said at the beginning, it's not Bill Gates. Bill Gates has a lot of money. Bill Cates, that's me. I'm going to help you make more money in the service of others. So hope you're up for that.
I think we're up for that. It's going to be good. Before we get into some of the strategies of referrals and the 3 R's, how did you discover them? I mean, how did you get so good at it? You wrote the books, you have the academy, you teach it. What's your story? How did you get discovered and get so good at the 3 R's?
Oh boy, big question. I'll try to be succinct. Before I was in this business of helping others grow their business, I had 2 businesses myself, 2 publishing companies actually. And I built them, I sold them. I sold one for a pretty good amount of money. I sold the other one to get out of a bad partnership and have him absorb all the debt. So, when someone tells you they've sold their business, it doesn't necessarily mean they made a lot of money. I've experienced a little bit of both. But what happened after I did that, I had a friend of mine come to me and said, you should be a business consultant and author. You're just so natural at this. You've helped me in my business. You could help a lot of other folks. And it sounded good, right? I like learning. I like teaching what I learn. And so that's how I ventured into this business consulting and speaking and writing. And I've always been interested in finding new clients. I've always been interested in marketing and prospecting. There's a lot that goes into building a business, but that's something that I was always drawn to. It's kind of the detective work that we have to go through to figure it all out. And I studied marketing with the Direct Marketing Association and other folks. And it came down to these days, everyone is looking to digitize their marketing and prospecting. And what I've realized for most businesses, not all, but for a lot of businesses, how their customers and clients really want to meet them is through an introduction from someone else they already trust, or from building a reputation in a target market that attracts people to them. So the whole relationship side tends to be a way to increase your revenue without increasing your marketing budget, which means more profitability.
On the relationship side of things, where do you see people most commonly go wrong when it comes to referrals and building business and marketing as a whole?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. You mentioned referrals, but before we get into that, in terms of marketing, the biggest mistake I see is really too much focus on themselves and not enough empathy, not enough focus on the prospect, the client, and it shows up in their messaging. So many businesses, we themselves all the way home. It's like, we do this, I do this, we do this, I do this, I'm an expert. When really our initial messaging, I mean, that does have its place. Building credibility certainly is important, but initially the messaging needs to, the prospect needs to see themselves in the message And so getting to know our market just so well that we use the words, the language, the concepts, the fears, the aspirations that we know are already in the minds and the hearts of the people we're trying to attract. So just looking at your website, are you talking about them, or are you talking about you when someone first lands to your website? Yes, you do want to talk about you, but at first you want to talk about them. So that's a big, broad mistake that people make in just the whole building of relationships and attracting people. When it comes to referrals and introductions, what stops people there, it's a little different. It's mistaken thinking. It's unhelpful thinking. So for instance, a lot of folks think that asking for referrals puts you in a needy place. Well, not if you do it correctly. It doesn't at all. In fact, that it puts you in a very strong position because you're bringing and you want to bring your value to other people, and it comes from that place. A lot of folks don't want to put, clients, others on the spot. They think that it's somehow going to hurt a relationship. And yeah, I suppose if you come across too aggressive, it could. But again, with the right methodology, and we can dive into some of that today, you won't put people on the spot necessarily. You certainly won't hurt the relationship. So it's the mindset. It's getting rid of those mistaken assumptions. And one of the reasons I wrote my current book, The Language of Referrals, is I wanted to give people sample language. And I found that when they realize, oh, I could say it that way, or I could approach it that way, it changes their perspective. And all of a sudden, a strategy like asking for referrals that wasn't available to them up until that point now becomes available because they see a path forward in how to make it work for them. So that's a few thoughts that come to mind with that question.
So when it comes to getting referrals, how do you start relationships and build a mutually valuable relationship or a foundation that will eventually lead to referrals so you don't feel awkward asking for them?
Sure. And the key word there is value. And it's almost an overused word, or is it overused? I don't know. It's used a lot, but it's important. So one of the principles I teach, and I love to talk in terms of principles as well as strategies and tactics, because when you know the principle, you can often figure out what the strategy and tactics should be for yourself. So one of the principles is that you have to be referable. All right. So what does that look like? How do you become referable? Well, first of all, your referability is in the eyes of the beholder. You may think you're providing great value, and you may very well be providing great value, but if it's not perceived and realized, then it doesn't really do you much good. So you're becoming referable when value is delivered and values recognized. And how do you know values being recognized? Well, there's two main ways. One is to pay attention to value recognizing statements. These are things that your prospects, your clients, and others will say about you, the work you provide, the relationships you build, the results you produce, all those nice things and thank yous that people provide. Now you're seeing value is being recognized. So what is that leverageable? And we can talk about, how do you leverage that? And then the other is a strategy, I guess more of a technique I've been teaching forever. I call it the value discussion. And essentially it's checking in with prospects early in a relationship, and then with clients or customers throughout the relationship, to make sure that expectations are being met, to make sure that they are indeed seeing the value. And when they talk it out, when they think a little bit about it and speak it into words, they get more in touch with that value, which is good. It's making you referable. You see that, it reinforces what you're doing, and that puts you in a position to leverage that, to think about, how do I promote or ask for introductions based on the fact that I have a happy, satisfied, engaged client. So it really does come down to referability. Two more quick things, Mark. To become referable, you have to connect with your prospects and clients in two ways. And I'm sure most of the people listening are already doing this. I want to shed a little light on this. And first of all, you got to create a value connection, meaning they like the things you ask. They like the questions you ask. They like how you teach. They like how you explain things clearly. They like your responsive service. They like your team. They like the results. That's all the value connection. And then you also have to have that personal connection, likability, trustability. They don't have to love you, but they have to like you enough to want to do business with you. And certainly they have to trust you. And both of those ingredients have to be in place all the time for you to get the business, for you to keep the business with you. And for you to become more referable, you have to continually think, how do I keep adding value so I stay relevant in their lives? And how do I keep building that, I like to call it a business friendship? How do I keep building that personal connection? So not only do they want to bring my value to others, but they don't mind helping me a little bit in the process. And so that's a little bit about creating a connection and becoming referable, so that if we do ask, or even if we don't ask, we get unsolicited referrals, which count, by the way, as long as they're meeting the criteria of the types of clients you want.
I love the concept, and a lot of people, you're right, they do talk about it. When it comes to adding value, what are some examples that you can give people if they say, oh, I get it, but it's so, it can be kind of vague, as like, well, I get value as a whole, but what are some examples of ways you can add value without being salesy?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, I mentioned already the idea of teaching and asking questions. So quite often we teach through the questions we ask, and we ask questions not as gotcha questions to prove our superior knowledge about a situation, but to get people to think about their situation related to whatever your product and service is. That's valuable, right? Just getting them to reflect, and the question may be the path that they're on right now, just to reevaluate. So that brings value. To teach people how to buy what you sell. In other words, take yourself out of the quote unquote selling influence equation for a moment and say, look, whether you work with me or whether you work with someone else, here are the things you want to make sure you look for. Obviously, you're going to do it in a way that puts you in a pretty good light. But let me give a concrete example. A friend of mine, Dave Kelly, owns a roofing company, pretty successful roofing company. And he told me a long time ago, when his business kind of took off is when he stopped trying to sell roofs. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I used to go to the home, I'd do an estimate. I'd say, we'd love to do your roof. And we sold some roofs. We did okay. We were competitive. He says, now what I do, I go to the home and I do an estimate. And I say, look, whether you work with us or another roofer in the area, make sure they give you heavy gauge flashing. A lot of roofers skimp on the flashing, causes problems down the road. Make sure they give you a proper nail pattern. A lot of folks won't do that out of haste or ignorance. And then a few other things he teaches. And so what happens by taking himself out of that sales equation and teaching, he brings great value and trustability that happens in that, likability, trustability, right? So early on, that's a way to do that. Moving into the relationship, the new relationship, think of the first 60, 90 days of your new client customer, if it fits, if you're more than just a transactional situation. What does that onboarding look like? How are you helping people feel good about the decision to work with you? How are you continuing to teach and educate and help give referrals to them to help them with their business in some form or another? And then finally, again, how do we keep dripping value on folks? Are we writing content? Do we have a blog? Do we have a podcast? Do we have some way of creating content that's helpful to our clients so that we keep that value proposition and we remain relevant throughout? So that's a few thoughts to that.
So you build the relationship, you add value. When it comes time to get referrals or ask for referrals, you mentioned the new book, The Language of Referrals. Can you speak a little bit, unpack that a little bit more? What is the actual language of getting referrals?
Yeah, so in the book and in the systems I teach, generally speaking, there's 4 main strategies. The first strategy is the inner language, which we talked a little bit about that, the mistaken thinking, the inner conversation around, should we do this, not do this? I don't want to hurt the relationship. The second part of the book and strategy is the language of becoming more referable, which we talked a little bit about that. And then the next part is the language of promoting or encouraging, which we should dive into. These are ways to kind of foreshadow the possibility and create unsolicited introductions. Then the language of asking, and what does that look like without looking like the creepy referral guy, in quotes. People that come to me for coaching and consulting, often this is what they say: how do we do this without looking like a creepy referral guy? I hear creepy, sleazy, cheesy. And then the language of objections, reluctance, uncertainty to participate in the referral process. There are some folks that are very careful about this and how to engage them. And we don't teach a heavy-handed process. Most cases, you're probably going to back off, but you don't want to fear them saying, I'd prefer not to. And then finally, a very important one is part 6 or strategy 6 is the language of introductions, meaning we should really think in terms of not just referrals, but we need to think in terms of introductions or connections. I think everybody on this watching this and listening to this has probably had a situation where you had a client or a customer said they're going to talk to someone about you, they're going to introduce you to someone, and you don't know if it happened, did it ever happen, or they did it, but it didn't work, and maybe they didn't say the right thing. The connection never got made. That's where it falls apart sometimes. And quite often it's on our fault by not engaging the introducer, the referral source, in a conversation to make us have us create a good introduction or connection with their friend, colleague, family member, whomever. So we got to get connected. We got to get introduced. And that's the word we really should use. You're hearing me use the word referrals and you're using it, and that's fine. But when we're with a prospect, a client, a customer, a center of influence, anyone who has ability to connect us with someone, we really should be using the word introduction, because that represents the full process. That represents what we really ultimately want, is that connection. So that's a little bit around the language. If you want, I can dive in a little more around the language of promoting. It's one of my favorite pieces. This is, we're not really asking yet. We're kind of foreshadowing, encouraging the possibility. We're bringing it up early and somewhat often in the conversation without being a pest, and really in this case, without really even asking. So a bunch of phrases I teach in the book, but I'll give you a few. One is, and I actually have a book with this title too, and that is "Don't Keep Me a Secret." Don't keep us a secret. Don't keep the important work we do a secret. Any version thereof. I didn't invent the phrase, but I kind of popularized it around the whole referral, word of mouth thing. Boy, I've seen so many people produce some nice results just by saying that. I've also had people tell me, Bill, that's a little cute. I'm not sure I could say that. That just doesn't fit me. And I go, fine. We've got others. We got plenty of others. So an alternative could be share the experience. Someone says, hey, this is great. Love what you're doing for us. Please share the experience. And then you could add on the third one, which is, I'm never too busy to see if I can be a resource for other people you care about, or for your colleagues or friends or whatever. Never too busy to see if I can be a resource. So you kind of offer it almost as a service to your customers and clients, that you're never too busy to see if you can be a resource for them. Maybe they could use your help, maybe not, but they should probably at least be aware of what you do and the options you provide. And so, don't keep me secret out there. So a lot of ways to encourage. There's some other ways I teach, but those are, 3 simple ones to remember. Don't keep me secret, share the experience, and never too busy to see if I can be a resource for others.
How often is too often? How do you know the frequency that you should engage people to get introductions?
It's a good question, and that's a little bit. There's a little art and a little science to it, and emphasis on the art side on this one. This is where they call it emotional intelligence, situational intelligence, where you can kind of read the context. So first of all, you don't want to ask everybody all the time, every time. That's obnoxious. Planting the seeds, promoting, as I just went through some of those things, that will often act as a barometer to your prospects or customers, clients' relationship to the possibility of referrals or introduction. You see how they react to "Don't keep me a secret," or you share the experience, or never too busy, and you get a feel for whether they might be open to this or maybe not so open to it. That can help you figure out when to ask and how often. I'll give you a formula for when to ask, and then I'll give you a little heads up on what you do if you ask more than once. So the first formula is kind of it's a trio of things. The first time you get together with a prospect, probably get acquainted meeting, could be a discovery call. It depends on your process, but you're going to at least provide some value. You're going to check in. You're going to make sure they're seeing value in the conversation, and then you're going to plant the seed. Great, glad you're seeing value. Please don't keep this a secret. Second time you get together, bring a little more value, teach, educate, build a connection, check in. How are we doing so far? How you seeing the value? How would you prioritize what we've talked about? Plant the seed. And then the third time you get together, third's the charm. A little more value, a little more check-in, and then that's where you can actually ask for the possibility of introductions to others. Now, can you do it sooner than that? Yes, of course you can, especially if you have a very open personality kind of person you're dealing with. They let you into their life quickly. They'll let you into the lives of others quickly. On the other hand, if you have someone that's obviously very guarded, like my dad, for instance, was a statistician, mathematician, statistician, analytic, you probably wait a little longer with his personality before you open it up. So that's a little formula that can be certainly adjusted to the situation. Let's say you want to ask a second time, a third time. The key here is always referring back to what happened the time before. So they don't feel like you're a robot. So they know you're paying attention and that you're on a mission to bring your important work to other folks in a way that isn't obnoxious or pushy. And they certainly don't need to feel obligated to do it. So let's say if Mark, if I asked you for a few, possible referrals, introductions early on our new relationship, and you weren't ready to go there, I could tell there was some hesitancy and I backed off. And let's say it's 6 months later and we're doing a little progress meeting, a check meeting, make sure everything's going. I say, when we first got together, I brought up the idea of possibly introducing me to some of your colleagues to help them become aware of what I do, what we're doing together, and to see if I might be a resource for them. And at the time, we were just getting together. You were just starting to test the waters with what we did. And I get that. You weren't ready. Mm-hmm. Now that we've been working together for a while, I was hoping that we might put our heads together for a minute and see if we can identify a few folks. I have a couple ideas I'd love to run by you, some folks I think and some categories of folks we help. So I'm letting you know, I know we did it before, and I know you weren't ready to do it back then. It's okay. But I'm also coming prepared. This is a big part of the ask. Coming prepared with specific people I know, or a few categories of folks in your situation that they might be going through that become receptive to the type of work I do. Now, let's say you did give me an introduction last time I asked. I say, Mark, last time we got together, you introduced me to your ex-business partner with whom you're still in a great relationship. I appreciate that. I think she told you we're working together. Yeah, good. I didn't even ask. I mean, I kind of nudged the process and you just volunteered. I appreciate it. I guess now I'm asking. I do have a couple other ideas I'd love to run by if you're open to it. That's kind of a no-brainer because you've already demonstrated a willingness to do it. So the key, again, is reflecting back on what happened before so it's not robotic-like. You're appreciating, you're acknowledging their situation, their willingness or reluctance, as the case may be, and then moving forward with the possibility. But I'm not pushing you to do anything you don't want. Are you open to the conversation? Assuming we come up with an approach that feels comfortable for you and comfortable for them, can we visit with this conversation? Can we see what that introduction might look like? So you always have a place to say no. Very important. We found that when we give people the out, so to speak, we get more in. That softer approach tends to open people up a little bit more. And they say, well, what do you have in mind? Who did I mention last time? Or what are the categories of people that you serve? Sometimes they want to help us. And sometimes they know people. They just don't realize they know people. We have to help trigger, them picturing folks in their mind's eye. And that can lead to some nice introductions. So that's a little bit about the when to ask and then, repeating more than once.
Well, I think you're touching on it already with some of the things you've said. How do you, when it comes to reputation, how can you create a referable reputation with your network?
Yeah. So, a referable reputation within network, there's a couple of things here that come to mind. One, we talked, of course, already about just providing value, being a connector, being a referral giver. And, there's a lot of folks that don't like to give referrals, make connections. They see it as a little risky. And I suppose it is a little risky. You never know exactly what's going to happen. So you got to make sure you only connect people that you feel pretty good about. But if you're not willing to take that little risk of making connections and serving people, being a connector, how are you going to expect other people to do it for you? I like to practice what I call the golden rule of introductions. So the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule of introductions is provide introductions unto others as you would have them provided unto you. Meaning you would like to have a good connection, right? You would like to have someone vouch for you, recommend you, connect you with them with an email or in person, follow up, make sure the connection's been made, right? That's creating a good connection. So you make sure you do that when you connect people in your network. You demonstrate the best way to make connections. And then people will see that and they will see the importance you give to it, and will hopefully emulate that when it's time for them to reciprocate with you. Now, when it comes to building a reputation, it's kind of hard to build a reputation for yourself when you have a shotgun approach to marketing in your market. Most businesses that I've worked with can usually benefit from narrowing their market a little bit, sometimes a lot, but at least a little bit. The problem happens is a couple of things. First of all, when you try to cast your net too wide, to too wide a market, it waters down your messaging. So your messaging becomes less relevant to everybody unless you segment and you have this market and the messaging goes to them, and this market and the messaging goes to them. That's how you fix that issue. But focusing on a target market, a very specific, clear market, where they congregate somehow. They may congregate on the web, they may congregate in person, maybe a little bit of both. They have ways of communicating with each other. And that's how you can serve them and start to build a reputation. And when they see that you're working with people like them or businesses like theirs, it gets easier. Your value prop is more relevant. It gets easier to get referrals because you're becoming more referable, because you're more valuable to them, because you know their world. And of course, they know people like themselves. They see that you want to work with people like themselves. And a lot of these folks start to bird dog for you. They start to look for people for you as a way to help you back. So building a reputation in a very clearly well-defined, usually narrower the better target market.
Introductions sounds like part of the core of the foundation here. How can you touched on it a little bit, but how can you fuse introductions? Because I think everyone listening in some way, shape, or form has been involved with, oh my gosh, you have to talk to Drew. He needs what you have. And then it just turns into crickets. And then it gets to it can almost be awkward. Like, do I bug them about this person I said they were going to introduce me to? How do you make an introduction actually happen as promised?
So the first thing is your mindset. You realize you're not done with this conversation until you've collaborated on a good introduction, or what you believe will be a good introduction. It could be in person. It could be a Zoom three-way. It could be an email handshake. Laura meet George, George meet Laura. The actual facilitating of the connection, a lot of different ways to do that. So you want to usually say to your introducer, your referral source, let's talk about how you introduced me to George. My guess is he probably would like to hear from you first before he hears from me. So let's talk about that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to talk to George first. It could be an email where he hears first. That's why I like the email handshake, electronic handshake, because it's very efficient and their friend hears from them first. And so when you follow up with an email, it's not a surprise. They've kind of vouched for you a little bit. They said some nice things and they recommend that you get together. So I like it because it's very efficient. It works great with B2B and B2C. You always want to talk in terms of a time frame. Who's going to do what by when? You're going to send an email. Great. Let me get. When do you think you'll be able to send that email to George? So I just want to look for it. I want to make sure I don't miss it, so I could, follow up appropriately. Could be as simple as that. When do you think you have a chance to talk to George so I can follow up, see if he's open to the conversation? Could be that. And then let's say the connection's been made, the email connection's been made, and you've reached out to George, but crickets, right? You haven't heard anything back. So what do you do there? Well, I kind of have it as a rule of two. Some people have a rule of three in this. I wouldn't go any further, but so let's say, Mark, somebody introduced me to you. No, let's flip that. Mark, let's say you introduced me to somebody named George. And I would go back to you and I'd say, Mark, I reached out to George per the email. I think you saw that. I've sent him a couple emails over the last couple weeks. I certainly don't want to be a pest. I want to be appropriate here. What do you think we should do next? What do you think we should do next? It's together. We're collaborating. We're trying to get this connection done together as best we can. So you're going to either say to me, well, look, if he's interested, he'll get back to you. I certainly don't want you to bug him. Okay. Or you could say, well, he was on vacation. I forgot to tell you that. I forgot about it. Maybe wait a week, try again. Or, well, I did mention you to him. I think he's interested. I'm not sure. Let me check. So any number of responses from you, the referral source, the introducer, but I want to keep you in the loop, and I want to keep you in the loop sooner than later. I don't want to let too much time go by, and I don't want to bug the other person too much. It's a balance here. Now, one more thing around this that kind of brings it full circle. I'm a big believer in saying thank you in two ways. Number one, I want to thank you for making the introduction, whether George meets with me or does business with me, it doesn't matter. I want to thank you for making the introduction. So at least a handwritten note, could have a gift card in it to Starbucks, or if you got kids, ice cream parlor or whatever, just something. It's not about the money. It's just a gesture of saying thank you. I like to send little thank you gifts to folks who give me referrals, sometimes coasters with where they went to school, the logo on it, or a fleece or a tumbler with the school logo. Anything I can do, their favorite sports team, anything I can do that kind of personalizes it a little bit. Now, it goes, so here's the powerful part. It goes like this. So let's say client A gives you a referral, makes an introduction to prospect B. Thank client A in some way, as I just mentioned. Now, prospect B becomes client B or customer B. What happens when they go back to their friend or colleague and say, thank you for that introduction, right? Now the referral source is being thanked by their friend, colleague, family member, etc. That's what really makes you referable. So I could say, Mark, when are you going to talk to George next? And you might say, well, we talk roughly once a week. I'd say, great. Thank him for both of us, please. He needs to know he did a good thing here. Here's a great way. Mark, I was thinking about taking George to lunch to say thank you for the introduction to you. I got a better idea. Let's both take him to lunch. I mean, I'll pick up the tab, but the thank you comes from both of us. Yeah. He needs to know he did a good thing here. Now you're at lunch with two people. They're talking about you. They're sometimes talking about other people they know and together that also should know about you. It's a very powerful way to bring the whole process full circle.
So during this whole process, how do you stay relevant? I'm guessing part of it is adding value, maybe reiterating something, but you meant, I know one of the 3 R's is relevant. So how do you stay relevant through this whole process?
Yeah. So radical relevance is really about identifying and getting to know your ideal client or customer with really a lot of depth and a lot of appreciation and empathy. You really get to know their business, their world. What are their fears, doubts, concerns, challenges? What are their goals, aspirations? What they want to achieve, in their business, in their personal life. And that gets easier when you target a market. So these all work together. So when you start to build a reputation in a target market, you can actually discover these things better. And then you want to keep dripping value on them. Now, let me tell you about my relevance laboratory. Everyone should have a relevance laboratory, I believe. I'll tell you my relevance laboratory. Mine is a few things. Number one, I write a blog. I do this to stay in touch with value. If I'm short of an idea, I'll go online. I'll look at other articles. I won't plagiarize. I won't steal, but I'll get sparked with an idea. And like someone may give 5 ways to do this or 10 ways to do that. And I love one of them and I'll write about that. That's one way I stay relevant. I have a podcast. It's mostly geared towards financial advisors, although a lot of folks who aren't advisors still like it. It's called Top Advisor Podcast, topadvisorpodcast.com. That's a relevance laboratory for me because I see what other people are doing. In some cases, they're doing things I taught and I see how they're using them. In a lot of cases, they're doing things I didn't teach them. They figure it out on their own or from others. And that becomes part of my repertoire. My coaching, consulting keeps me in touch with people, keeps me relevant. I put my prospects and clients' world first because if I know what drives them and what moves them and what interests them, then I will always be relevant by bringing things related to them, not what I think. Now, sometimes there are things you think they should know that they don't realize they need to know. There's nothing wrong with taking a leadership role, but generally most of it's got to come from really knowing them and indeed knowing what they want. And the better you get to know them, then the more you can come in with some things that maybe they didn't realize they needed or wanted or should have. So, if you're not relevant, if how you talk about your value isn't relevant to the receiver, then you'll be ignored. They'll ignore it, right? The first thing the brain is looking for is this relevant? Is this something I should pay attention to? Is this dangerous? Is this safe? Is this an opportunity? That's what the brain's looking at. And if it doesn't recognize, if it feels salesy, which then appears in the brain as danger, or if it's just something that just doesn't seem important, then the brain's going to ignore it because the brain wants to conserve energy. It doesn't want to spend any time on anything it doesn't need to. It wants to conserve energy to keep the organism alive. So if you're not relevant, you'll be ignored. And then kind of part of that too, if you're not compelling, if you don't have a way to move people forward into action around the things you communicated, if you're not compelling people forward, then you'll eventually, be forgotten. You got to stay relevant and compelling at all times. And you do that by just truly digging in and getting to know your market and your customers and your prospects and keeping relevance as an important thing top of mind at all times.
Well, I think you touched on this too a little bit, as far as knowing your prospects and your market, knowing more about them, doing a deeper dive. Could you unpack a little bit more about how do you find that ideal niche client and not be one of those people that goes to an event and says, "Oh, anybody with money," or something like that? What kind of process? That always scares me. It's like, really?
Well, of course. Yeah, of course. Anybody whose check will clear. So yeah, I mean, when you try to be all things to all people, you're nothing to nobody, I'm writing a book right now, another book. And, people say, so who's the book for? And while I know that anyone who reads the book could probably benefit, I mean, I know that in my heart. That's the kiss of death when it comes to talking about the book and having relevant marketing. So in writing the book, I have to have the who in mind. Who is this book for? And so that will adjust how I write the book. It'll adjust the content that's in there. And I may leave out some potential audiences for the book, but I'll be more successful when I have a very clear target and I target the right people who are more likely to buy and enjoy the book. So narrowing our focus is always critical. So usually some criteria for a good target market maybe is a good place to go with this. First of all, the target market has to be big enough to make it worth you spending a little extra energy on figuring it out and putting some energy into reaching those folks. It's got to be big enough. It doesn't have to be your entire business career big enough, although some people do that. They have to have the financial capacity for what you do. Whatever product service that you offer, they have to be able to afford it. It helps that they know they have the problem you solve. It's always better to build a business based on knowing that you solve a blatant critical problem. In other words, your market knows they have the challenge and it feels critical to them. It's something they have to fix. It's not an aspirational fix. It's a have to fix. And so I know that, one of my target markets is financial advisors, and I know they really do want more referrals and introductions. It's how the people they want to meet them. So it's pretty important to their business. So it's blatant and it's critical. Also, what else? I mentioned congregation. They have a place where they congregate online, in person. They have formal and informal ways of communicating with each other. There's associations, there's newsletters, there's Facebook groups, there's all that sort of stuff. And it helps that you kind of like the folks or like the industry, you like the people in it. I mean, why would you want to target a market where you really don't like the people, generally speaking, or don't care much for the work that they do, or kind of neutral for the work that they do? I'm not neutral around the people that I serve. I want to help them be more successful and help more people through the work that they do. So those are some of the criteria of a good target market. And most businesses that have been up and running for at least a while, 6 months to a year, have that market sitting in front of them, even if they haven't gone in all, with both feet. They have a few clients that came from here and from here and from here, and they look and they go, I got 2 or 3, in this industry or in this company or in this business or in this category. I'll start to focus my energy there. So let me give you one example. Johannes Harrison is a financial advisor. I interviewed him for my podcast recently, and his primary target market are emergency room physicians, not just physicians in general. He's gone narrower, which is good. He lives in a city big enough where he can do that. And he belongs to the Association of Emergency Room Physicians as a partner and all that sort of stuff. Now, he will also work with other folks who aren't emergency room physicians as long as he feels he's the right person for them and can do a good job for them. So he's not turning down other business, but any of his proactive, any of his energy, marketing, time, energy, maybe a few dollars, is all based on his target market, the emergency room physicians. So you can go all in, and he could have gone all in and only work with emergency room physicians and still do quite well. But he kind of likes the variety a little bit and doesn't mind helping other folks that come naturally through that work. And so that's one of many approaches to a target market.
We have covered a lot of ground in a relatively short period of time.
When
it comes to referrals, introductions, the 3 R's, if someone's saying, okay, I get it, this makes sense to me, I heard a lot of good stuff. If you were to say, you know what, if you're going to get started somewhere, at least do this one thing, at least this one thing above all, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark, and I kind of touched on it. So I'm glad you asked this. Of all the things that I've been teaching for over 30 years in this current business of mine, probably the most important and the most impactful, quickly impactful for folks is what I labeled the value discussion, and that's checking in with prospects and clients, open-ended questions at the end of meetings. We covered a lot here today. What stands out as the most important? How would you prioritize this? I appreciate you making the decision to move forward with us. I know you had a lot of things to consider. I'm curious what tipped the scales. And any kind of open-ended question, it gets them in touch with the value, gets you in touch with the value. I've seen many folks get referrals, introductions without even asking, just from the value discussion. It also helps you clean up anything in a relationship that needs cleaning up. Here's the principle. I hope you all agree. A relationship that's had a problem, that's been handled well, is a stronger relationship than one that's never had a problem. If you agree with that, then you need to go looking for any places expectations aren't being met. And once you're, 3 months, whatever, or more into a relationship, how are we doing with expectations? Are we meeting your expectations? Any place we've fallen short, we need to know that so we can fix it or at least prevent it in the future. Most of the time, they're just going to flip to the good, positive stuff they like about you. But every now and then, you'll have something to clean up, which is important. And then you can say, well, great. And what is working to make sure we keep doing that for you, and maybe learn from that and do it for others too. And so then you get into the positive side of things as well. That's really the precursor part of the conversation that gets into the request for referrals or introductions. But even if you do that and just do that and maybe plant the seed, great. I'm glad I got a happy client. I'm glad you're seeing the value. And I've mentioned this before, and I mean it. I am never too busy to see if I can be a resource for other folks in your business, in your industry, in your circle of friends, whatever. So that, of all the things, that's a big one. If I can give you a secondary one real quick, it would be narrowing your market, narrowing your target, starting to build a reputation with the who you want to serve, because that tends to make everything else work a little bit easier and takes the friction out of client attraction.
Thank you so much for the time. And if people want to find you online, what's the best place or places to go?
Yeah, I guess that'd be the fourth R. Well, it's kind of the third R. Referralcoach.com. Referralcoach.com. That's my website. Get you into my world. Shoot me a message. Love to talk to you. Want to bring value to you first before anything else. And if it makes sense for us to work together, we can certainly look at that.
This has been awesome, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure.
And scene. Thank you for tuning into the Idea Climbing radio show today. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something great out of it that you can take into your own life and use to be better in your own life. If you want more great shows like this, go to 216thenet.com. You want to see more of my interviews, radio show, and podcast? Go to markjcartertv.com. Again, that's markjcartertv.com and 216thenet.com. Hope to see you on one of those.